The Albanese government claims it's doing very well in the influence battle in the Pacific, but China's fresh military drills around Taiwan will be cause for concern in Canberra. Minister Pat Conroy revealing to 7 News he wants to lift domestic defence production.
The Indo-Pacific, it's Australia's backyard and the focus of a global power struggle. China is testing America and its allies, ramping up military drills around Taiwan, as Australia deploys soft diplomacy closer to home. You have big responsibilities in the Pacific. How close is China now to our South Pacific neighbours?
Well, we've been very honest that we're in a perpetual contest with other countries, principally China, to be the partner of choice in the Pacific.
Are we winning or losing?
I think we're doing very well.
Meet Labor's Minister for the Pacific, Pat Conroy. He signed new treaties with Papua New Guinea, Tuvalu and Nauru, and also holds the key defence industry portfolio. Revealing to Seven's podcast The Issue, his political hero is former Labor Prime Minister John Curtin.
He saved Australia during World War II. He was proudly a member of the Labor left, which is where I'm from, and he made the case that workers and the working class should be passionate about national security and defence, because as the old saying says, a bayonet is a weapon with a worker on both ends of it.
Around 70% of Australia's defence spend on equipment and maintenance goes to Australian-based businesses, a number Conroy wants to maintain, even increase.
I'm an advocate for horses for courses, matching the best from around the world with what we can do here.
The government's priorities include establishing an Australian missile industry and a $10 billion spend on drones and autonomous systems. Lessons Conroy has learnt from briefings on Ukraine's fight with Russia.
You cannot go above the surface there without immediately being at risk from being struck by either missiles or drones or a combination of both.
Preparing for modern warfare. Tim Lester, 7 News.
If you've ever used legal aid and you still haven't checked if you could be owed compensation, listen to this.
China's military is testing a new kind of weapon, robot wolves. Recent footage aired on state TV revealing how the advanced technology could be used to attack Taiwan. From there, our Asia correspondent Stash Butler reports.
Chinese forces rehearse a beach invasion, a familiar drill key to a potential assault on the island of Taiwan. What's different in this recent state broadcast is these quadruped robots carrying ammunition and clearing simulated mines.
If they're able to clear some kind of path, the human beings, foot soldiers following behind, know that it is then safe.
China calls the vehicles robot wolves, and since their debut last year, they've taken a growing part in displays of military might.
In Taiwan, analysts have played down the robots' threat to the island. They say the machines still struggle in battle environments and that Taipei can use signal jamming to stop them in their tracks.
But that defence may not hold for long, because drone warfare in Ukraine has accelerated a worrying new trend.
The solution that warring parties have found is, well, let's end communications between the operator and the drone, because that then prevents jamming technology from working.
The same way you can do that to a quadcopter and cause a quadcopter to fall out of the sky, you can do the same thing with one of these systems on the ground as well. And that pushes in the direction of autonomy, because then you aren't required to have that signal to the human operator.
Self-guided robots could overwhelm Taiwan's defences and raise serious questions about the rules of war.
You can't really hold a robot accountable for an attack that could kill scores of civilians and violate the law.
But for now, analysts say autonomy, on land at least, is far from being achieved. And the robots are no silver bullet for taking Taiwan.
So there'll be sort of operational tactical benefits, but will it produce a war-winning strategic effect? No.
Still, the robots are the latest symbol of China's deepening military modernisation and the challenge that it poses across the Taiwan Strait. Stash Butler, Sky News, Taipei.
This is China's military, deploying one of their largest amphibious fleets ever seen in an exercise. Hundreds of military ships, fishing vessels, fighter jets, and soldiers launching a simulated full-scale attack. This is footage from about 30 years ago, and while that might seem like a long time ago, it gives us a sense of what a potential invasion could look like.
And so for Taiwan, which is faced with this existential threat, how does it plan to stop China from landing? Well, in this video, we're going to break down Taiwan's overall coastal defense strategy, starting from the invasion buildup all the way to the landing.
Before we talk about boots on the ground and the massive armada that would try to cross the Taiwan Strait, we need to talk about the buildup that would happen beforehand.
在军事准备上面永远要想，就是最不可能的，这是最危险。
Xu Ziyun is one of the directors at the INDSR, a security-focused think tank here in Taipei. They've been working closely with the military and agreed to give us a closer look at what they say is the worst-case scenario.
大概在现代的情报科技会很早就知道，因为他如果要 invade， 他可能要大规模的动员 mobilization， 部队的调动、船舰的集结，这些都会有一个 sign 或 signal 可以发现。但是我们还是一样，这是一个 worst case。假设他是用 supply attack。利用常常在台湾周边的这个战备警巡，突然变成攻击，台湾还是要防护。
Now for this episode, we spoke to multiple analysts to get a general sense of how things would most likely unfold.
The important thing to remember is that if you want to successfully conduct an invasion, you need thousands, maybe millions of people involved in this type of an attack. So it's a major logistics effort, and that's really, really hard to hide. We're talking weeks, if not perhaps like over a month, of just gathering people into the right places, getting them the billets, and then getting them onto their transports.
Estimates from different think tanks show that at least around 500,000 troops would be needed to attempt this kind of operation. Other reports sometimes mention numbers that surpass even 1 million troops. And in terms of ships, we're looking at tens of thousands of naval and transport ships that would need to carry all of those people and equipment across the Taiwan Strait. This is all considered what analysts say is the nightmare scenario.
所以所有的准备都是 worst case。那当然我们不希望走到战争，可是你要prepare for war to keep peace.
Now, since President Tsai's second term, Taiwan has tried to tweak its coastal defense strategy to become just a bit more offensive. That means instead of waiting, Taiwan has the options to try and strike and hit targets before they start making the trip across the Taiwan Strait. So chronologically speaking, Taiwan would most likely start with laying mines. Lots and lots of mines. Taiwan has been working on this kind of capability for quite some time, using small ships like these to lay mines that would explode once they detect an enemy.
And that means things like mining international waters. It's certainly not a great look. It could hit passing ships. I mean, most civilian ships will have fled if they know a conflict is coming. The ultimate decision point will be how effective are the long-range strike options.
Over the past 10 years, Taiwan has also made major investments into systems like the HIMARS, which is a very mobile rocket launcher system. The HIMARS is able to fire the ATACMS missile, which can reach the coastline of mainland China. Experts say in a full-out war, Taiwan has the option of conducting preemptive strikes where the PLA are gathering.
ATACMS weapon systems have a range of about 300 kilometers and would allow Taiwanese forces to reach in pretty deep to hit both the ports where the personnel and the ships are massing, but perhaps even deeper to hit some of those logistics nodes, some of those big stockpiles of ammunition and water, which would make life very difficult on the Chinese military.
It would be tough to say how effective those attacks would be for Taiwan, as the closer the attack is to China, the more its military is protected by its network of air and missile defense. Taiwan also has the ability to send elite special forces and frogmen, which are the equivalent to the US's Navy SEALs. But because of their highly classified and covert missions, not much is known about this unit, but they can sabotage and attack Chinese military sites.
So I think Taiwan can do things that would make the invasion harder, that would complicate, but chances are Chinese military planners would have already accepted that some number of its forces would be getting hit while they are mobilizing. It would have calculated that it accepts this risk, and it will probably still be able to launch the invasion.
But in the lead up to the war, Chinese defense plans call for a joint fire strike campaign. That means that China would launch hundreds of missiles and try and destroy Taiwanese military facilities and move in closer to support that landing. Taiwan would try to use its air defenses to protect those areas.
如果中国决定采取军事冒险行动，很可能就是会从东部战区、南部战区对台湾进行攻击。那同时，它的航空母舰或是所谓两栖攻击舰也会尝试穿越巴士海峡、宫古海峡，从台湾东部进行包围。台湾可能选择就是所谓的不对称作战，利用各种飞弹 （air defense） 或是 anti-ship missile， 成立一个这个 deny zone， 阻绝中国海空军靠近台湾。它如果不能登陆、不能占领台湾，其他军事行动就没意义。
Taiwan's navy might try to hold the line against China, but given the sheer size of Beijing's navy, Taiwan won't be able to match China's ship for ship. But taking out these ships is still a big priority, because if China's destroyers are still operating, they could protect and bring in more troops across the strait, and China wants to be able to control this area.
And the reality is that I think the Chinese are going to want to try to establish air dominance over the island and try to destroy key naval and air facilities before they start closing in on Taiwan itself.
This is where Taiwan is hoping to utilize its growing stock of anti-ship missiles to take out warships that start to make their way across the Taiwan Strait. This includes US-made Harpoon missiles and domestically made Xiongfeng missiles. Depending on where China begins to cross, think tanks estimate it would take around 12 hours to cross the strait.
From an anti-ship perspective, you need to have as much mass as possible, as many Harpoon systems, HIMARS rockets, indigenous anti-ship missiles, that you can sink those ships, even if they're decoys, right? You have enough of them where you're going to take out most of the landing ships. If you sink the majority of the fleet, then this is not doable. Then China is lost.
Taiwan can also use its air force to attack Chinese warships as they cross the Taiwan Strait. But from what we've seen with Taiwan's military drills and our conversations with analysts, that might not be the most effective. Instead, Taiwan would probably pull back the majority of its fleet to make sure that it can preserve power for as long as possible. If you want to learn more about that strategy and how good Taiwan's air force is in general, you can check out that video here.
Hopefully some of these assets will survive to be able to operate a bit closer in to help direct those fires that we had talked about, to make life difficult on any ships that China attempts to send Taiwan's way. But the challenge is for Taiwan, it just can't afford to have enough of these ships and enough of these jets. And China's got so many assets at its disposal to take these things out that it's a basic numbers game.
As these large Chinese transport ships make their way towards the center of the Taiwan Strait and into Taiwan's territory, many of these warships would start to disembark into smaller amphibious landing craft and hovercraft to spread out and increase the chance of survival. Helicopters would also join that push and try and make it ashore. But this would be one of the most dangerous parts of the invasion for China, and also the most decisive.
If all else has failed, deterrence has faltered, Xi Jinping has decided to attack, this would be the decisive moment at which to really wear down the invasion force.
Aside from trying to avoid the variety of sea mines in the ocean, Chinese ships would be up against a wide array of Taiwanese defenses as they come within 60 to 40 kilometers of the coast. This would include various types of artillery fire from howitzers as they splash all across the Taiwan Strait. Taiwan's Thunderbolt 2000 rocket system and HIMARS would also engage vessels as soon as they come within range. Taiwan would also unleash hundreds of unmanned systems and suicide drones to hit incoming ships, turning the Taiwan Strait into what many U.S. observers say is a hellscape. Drones of all different shapes and sizes could be sent to complicate Chinese planning and efforts to make it ashore.
The beachhead is the critical point. If you can knock that beachhead back quickly, then you have your chance of surviving an amphibious invasion go up pretty significantly. Now, if you think about Taiwan, similar sort of thing. The better able that the Chinese are to establish a beachhead, protect it, build up their forces, and kind of surge outward from there, the more likely they're going to be able to successfully invade the island.
As Chinese ships continue to push forward and come within 10 kilometers, these landing ships would be within range of Taiwan's fleet of 90 strong attack helicopters. Taiwan's military has plenty of experience flying these helicopters in the mountains, coming out to shoot quickly before returning to safety. Now imagine you're a PLA soldier and you're roughly 5 kilometers out from Taiwan's coast and closing in. Well, somewhere inland, hiding in the terrain, Taiwan's newly acquired Abrams, as well as newly upgraded tanks, would be firing non-stop at landing ships as they reach the shore. Guided tow missiles would also be whizzing through to find their targets, controlled by soldiers in military vehicles.
As an amphibious armor officer in the Marine Corps, I do know exactly what it is like to plan to come ashore, so I have been on the proverbial beach, but it was on the attacker's side from the attacker's perspective. What we're thinking about doing here is trying to create what in the First World War the Germans called the storm of steel. In essence, you make it so lethal for any Chinese Marine, Chinese infantrymen to clamber off of that landing craft, that assault boat, because at some point they got to get out and do their job. You make it so lethal, so deadly, that anybody that survived that long doesn't have much longer to go.
Taiwan's annual Hangguang military exercises offer good insight into what this part of the defense strategy would look like, as units would also combine that tank fire with extra support from javelins and rocket launchers. Every year, Taiwan's military runs through the motions of how they would defend an incoming landing, and we can see that last part of this defense on full display. You can see in this drill that the beach is not exactly empty, and that's because in an invasion, the military would move tons of obstacles and barriers along the coastline to make it more difficult for the invading force. This would also involve sinking ships near crucial shallow waters and covering certain parts of the beach with old cars, barbed wire, tires, and even more mines. Basically, making it as difficult as possible to even take a step on the beach, let alone make it to shore. But what happens if they do make it to the shore? Well, that's where China would meet Taiwan's military head-on, and we actually spoke to some of the soldiers as they were training on the beach.
And the military has given us these bulletproof vests and equipment for safety purposes because that popping sound that you're hearing is live fire ammunition. Now, the Army does these routine shooting exercises about once every 3 months in order to give their soldiers a different kind of training. Instead of shooting inside of a controlled base, they can do it outside, potentially where they could do the fighting.
we meet up with a company commander who explains that his soldiers have been doing this kind of training for a while as they get more familiar with their area of responsibility. And this training starts with routine shooting practice.
我们今天用4个靶位，然后配合障碍靶的部分对海实施射击，那会受到天候的影响，然后以及风速的影响。那对于它射击的精准度跟它的环境的掌握度，它就会特别去磨练官兵的部分。
Some analysts have highlighted this area as a strategic position in a possible invasion, which is why the northern coastline of Taiwan has seen the military step up its training in these areas outside of their base.
Do you want to learn some code for free? Then Code Institute's 5-day coding.
Tension is running high between China and Taiwan. Beijing has carried out its biggest ever military drills off the island, saying that they were a warning to what it calls separatist forces. So what was behind the show of power? And would China ever use force against Taiwan? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Adrian Finnegan. More rockets have been launched as China continued its massive live-fire exercises off Taiwan. Beijing named the drills Justice Mission 2025, and they're widely seen as a show of force as China seeks to assert its claim that Taiwan is part of its sovereign territory. Since 1949, successive Chinese leaders have made it clear that military action would be used to seize the island. This time, the drills come on the heels of an $11 billion arms deal between the United States and Taiwan. And although the US wasn't mentioned, Beijing called the drills a stern warning to external forces. So, can the tension be contained? We'll discuss all that with our guests in just a moment. But first, Imogen Kimber reports.
Live fire during Chinese military manoeuvres off the coast of Taiwan. These are the largest military drills China has ever carried out around the Pacific island. It follows the US announcing one of its biggest sales of military equipment to Taiwan, worth around $11 billion. Beijing says it's sending a stern warning to Taiwan against any attempts towards separatism and seeking independence by force.
In response to the large-scale US arms sales to Taiwan, we must, of course, resolutely oppose and forcefully counter them.
Taiwan says the drills violate international norms and pose a threat to peace.
These actions not only undermine cross-strait peace, but also threaten peace in the Indo-Pacific and global prosperity.
China has been increasing its displays of military might for years, but has recently intensified them.
Achieving total reunification of the motherland is in accordance with safeguarding national sovereignty and territorial integrity, and is a historical mission we must accomplish.
China occupied Taiwan from the 17th century, but ceded control to Japan at the end of the 19th. After Japan's defeat by Allied forces in World War II and takeover of control of China by the People's Communist Party, neither were in control of the island after 1949. US policy states that it will defend Taiwan. However, US President Donald Trump says he is not concerned by the latest developments.
Great relationship with President Xi, and he hasn't told me anything about it. I certainly have seen it, but he hasn't told me anything about it, and I don't believe he's going to be doing it. Nothing worries me. Nothing.
The US support for Taiwan angers China, and it's sanctioned around 30 US firms and individuals involved in the recent arms sales. But Taiwan is not the Americans' only ally in the Pacific. The US has a network of agreements with other states there. So if China did launch a bid to take Taiwan, the repercussions could potentially be far-reaching. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
So let's bring in our guests. From Shanghai, we're joined by Sean Ryan, founder and managing director of China Market Research Group. From Taipei is Chen Yen, research fellow at the Institute of International Relations. And from Singapore, we're joined by Jiayan Xiong, associate professor of political science at the National University of Singapore. Gentlemen, welcome to you all. Sean, let's start with you. What message were these drills intended to send, and to whom exactly?
Well, it's great to see you, Adrian. Well, October 7th didn't start on October 7th, and these drills were not a provocation by mainland China. It's really Chinese government is trying to send a strong signal to three groups. The first is the Taiwanese. Second, and perhaps most importantly, is the new Prime Minister of Japan, Takaichi, who has taken a very warlike, aggressive stance towards China's rise and has said that Japan will consider Taiwan to be a national security issue if there is armed aggression between Taiwan and China, and that Japan would have to get involved. You have to remember, Japan is doubling its military budget over the next 5 years. People within the Prime Minister's office have said that Japan should rearm with nuclear weapons. And then the third group that the Chinese government is trying to warn is Donald Trump and the Americans, saying, you know what? It's not good that you sold $11 billion worth of arms to Taiwan. We're not going to allow you to contain China's economic growth and impinge on China's sovereignty. So it's really three groups, Adrian, that China has launched such a large, blockade, naval exercises against Taiwan over the last 2 days, because China feels that it's being oppressed and that the Americans and the Japanese are bullying China, which I agree, I think they are. And so China's going to say, we're not going to be bullied. We're not going to go back to the World War II era. We're not going to go back to Imperial China era, where the Western powers and Japan, really hurt China and impoverish them and cause tens of millions of people to die, Adrian. So China, I don't think wants war, but needed to show and send a very strong shot across the bow.
Chen Shenyang in Taipei, what do you make of that? These are, the sixth round of large-scale military drills around Taiwan since 2022, when U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited the island. Was Taipei taken by surprise by the sheer scale of these military drills?
Well, I think we are surprised. This is at the end of the year. We are, reaching out to 2026, and people always worry about 2027 or 2035 or even 2049. This is such a live drill, so close to Taiwan. Before 2027, at the end of 2025, yes, that was a surprise. But just like Sean mentioned, it is not a surprise when you see Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaishi's comments about Taiwan contingency, which Taiwan is really doesn't even have diplomatic relations with Japan, and we don't have so-called security alliance with Japan. So why is Japan involved in this one? And that's why China is very sensitive to Takaichi's comments. And also, we have purchased weapons. We have procured weapons from the U.S. in the past. Yes, China, every time China protests, but this is the first time it reacts with a strong military exercise. So that was a little bit surprise to us. But, overall, I think we are not surprised, because since you mentioned Pelosi's visit, this exercise around Taiwan's water, around Taiwan's territorial water or airspace have been tightened and tightened. Every time, we lost our midline between, in the Taiwan Strait, between Taiwan Island and mainland China. And then, we even lost the 24th, so-called the territorial water. And then the contiguous water right now is also being violated sometimes. So this is almost like a land Dien Bien Phu in Vietnam War between Vietcong and the French. It's an encirclement of Taiwan, but not on land, but on the ocean as well.
All right, Jayan, I want to come back to the comments by Japan's Prime Minister in just a few minutes. But in the meantime, let's pick up what Sean was saying. Is China being bullied right now by Japan, the US, and Taipei?
China is a big power. It is the second largest economy in the world. I'm not sure that China is being bullied. Certainly, it's facing pressure. But it has a lot of capabilities to bear. Of course, it's very common that the PRC will claim that it's bullied, will claim that it's angry. But you know what? Coming from a much smaller country in Southeast Asia, many of us are, all of us are smaller than the PRC. It's somewhat strange to hear this bullying language.
Okay, Sean, do you want to come back on that? Beijing, of course, has sanctioned around 30 US defense firms after this $11.1 billion arms sale to Taiwan. Are those sanctions symbolic? Do they meaningfully change anything, the cost calculus, for instance, for Washington?
Yeah, no, this is basically very symbolic. So they first slapped sanctions on subsidiaries of companies like Boeing. So China might still buy Boeing airplanes for commercial purposes, though there was a 4-year moratorium starting in 2020 when China didn't buy any commercial airliners from Boeing because they wanted to sort of punish Washington, D.C. for what is clear bullying to anyone with a pragmatic mind. and instead they bought Airbuses from France. But they also did symbolic sanctions on people like Palmer Luckey, who's the CEO and founder of Anduril, one of the largest drone companies, because Palmer has said he's getting his entire company, his drone company, everything ready to be able to defend Taiwan in case China were to launch armed aggression against Taiwanese, to really push for reunification. So people like Palmer Luckey, a lot of the other executives on the list are heads of other drone companies, are part of this new force of weapon technology. So it's no longer just the Lockheed Martins and the Raytheons of the world, it's now the drone manufacturers like Anduril. And so China wants to make sure that these people and their companies can't get access to China's ecosystem of drone manufacturing, because for a lot of these companies, 60-70% of their parts are still sourced from mainland China. So it's a symbolic push, but it's very clear to me, and I think to most Chinese, that America and Japan is trying to bully China, even though it is the second largest economy. You can see over the last 9 years, China's put export controls, sanctions on China. They've pushed companies like ASML from the Netherlands not to sell their equipment to China. They're banning companies like Huawei from the United States. They're stealing TikTok in the United States. So it's very clear that there's this containment policy starting first under Joe Biden. It's certainly lessened under Donald Trump, but the Chinese feel that they're under an assault. Again, October 7th didn't start on October 7th. The Americans are provoking China. A lot of people in China feel that the Americans want to start a proxy war over Taiwan, the same way that NATO and the United States started a proxy war with Russia over Ukraine, to sort of impoverish and bog down the Russians, and also to send a signal to China. So Xi Jinping has said, I don't want to get into a proxy war in Taiwan with the Americans. I'm not that stupid. I'm not like what Putin did.
All right, Chen Chen-yen, please feel free to come back on that. But I wanted to talk to you about reaction there in Taiwan. In a statement on Tuesday, Taiwan's Defense Minister, Wellington Koo, said that Beijing's highly provocative actions severely undermine regional peace and stability and also pose a significant security risk and disruption to transport, ships, trade activities and flight routes. Koo described the exercise as a form of cognitive warfare that aimed to, quote, deplete Taiwan's combat capabilities through a combination of military and non-military means, and to create division and conflict within Taiwanese society through a strategy of sowing discord. In what way could they sow discord among people in Taiwan? How do most people feel about China right now and about these drills?
Do you want to study psychology and learn how it shapes people and workplaces?
Do most people feel about China right now and about these drills?
Okay, right now, I think, this military exercise is only for 2 days, but we get a taste of what kind of blockade might imply. For example, you mentioned about transportation, also, just not just ships, but also airlines. They have to change their, routes to avoid this exercise. So we kind of feel, if this really happened, will Taiwan's energy supply, especially the gas, liquefied gas, and also the oil from Middle East going through the South China Sea, through Taiwan Strait, if it's blockade, we only can have about 2 weeks of reserve. So do we have enough? So that's going to be a consideration. And the other one is just being a regular traveler, that you go to other country and now your flight may be canceled, maybe delayed. So this is the first one. Also, it's intimidating because it is so close to Taiwan, and then they even shown a drone with a picture of a footage of our 101, which people said that might not be real, but still they are trying to intimidate Taiwan, not just militarily, but also economically and psychologically as well. But the problem with Taiwan is we have, heard the wolf is coming for, this is, you mentioned the 6th time since Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. So people might feel so leaving off their guards. That is not a good news for Taiwan. We are not on our toe sometimes, but this time I think the military, the Defense Department is more alert than before. But still, for ordinary people, we didn't take it very seriously, because even before this one, we have a lot of drilling, emergency drill, but not a single time that we have a actual drill of make sure everybody know where the bunkers are, where do you hide. It's just 1 hour of not being able to go out. You just stay in your home, or if you are in a restaurant, you just stay until from 1:30 to 2 o'clock or 2:30, something like that. I think we need to have a more, I would say, almost like warlike type of preparation, instead of the government worry that if they actually mobilize people to prepare for war, it will be chaotic. So I think that's the mentality right now. It's like keeping it a low profile, and then everybody will be okay. And that's not the best way to prepare for it.